for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Are there any comments from the public that are not agendized? Seeing none. Moving on to item number 3, is there any corrections to the agenda or consent calendar?
No, there are not.
There are not. Item 4, adoption of the consent calendar.
I'll move adoption of the consent calendar.
Second. Thank you. No items brought forward for item 5. Moving on to item 6A, state line tank recoding project. Taylor.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Taylor Jamie, staff engineer. I'm here today to discuss the state line tanks recoding project with y'all. I'll give you a little bit of background before I propose our requested action. So this project is part of the district's ongoing maintenance, tank maintenance program, which mainly focuses on the rehab of the tank's protective coatings, which help to prevent corrosion. This project is very similar to many of the recent tanks coating projects, the most recent being the Gardner Mountain Tanks Recoating Project, which we completed last summer. This effort specifically focuses on state line tanks number 1 and 2, which are located next to Van Sickle Park down at State Line. These are the district's largest and most critical tanks, and together they provide both operational storage and fire flow storage for the State Line pressure zone, which is the district's largest pressure zone. Last spring, we conducted a comprehensive condition assessment of these 2 tanks and identified significant coating failures and associated corrosion on both of the tanks. Based on those findings, a full interior and exterior recoating of both tanks is recommended. The consultant who performed the condition assessment didn't recommend any structural steel repairs at this time based on the level of corrosion and metal loss that was measured at the time of the condition assessment. Based on these findings, we plan to fully recoat the interior and exterior of both tanks, and we will also use this opportunity to upgrade the tank's cathodic protection systems and ladder fall protection systems. Due to the size of the tanks, this project is planned as a 2-phase effort, with tank number 1 slated for being recoated this coming construction season, 2026, and then tank number 2 being recoated during the construction season, 27. The engineer's estimate for this project is approximately $2.2 million. And with that, I'll turn it over to you if you have any questions.
Quick question.
Sure.
So, yeah, these tanks are obviously pretty critical, but is there any construction activity that spans where you'd have to do winterization up there? I just know there's a lot of activity, like people, like sure. Whether it's coming down fire break or whatever, you know, there's like a lot of people in there, and just if that's in there, just from a safety standpoint, in between seasons here?
Yeah, so the project sequencing is planned to have the first tank be completely coated and completed. Okay. So we're going to be in this summer, completed before October 15th, and then we'll just do the whole thing again the summer of 27.
Remobilize everything.
Yeah,
okay.
So they're going to completely clean the side and make it all safe.
Just a question on budget. I noticed that we have an allotted amount of $642, but you had indicated that the price tag is like 2.2. Is this something we're going to be talking through as we move through the CIP and the budget discussions?
Yeah. Any other questions?
Any questions? Are there any comments from the public or questions from the public? Seeing none, what would you like us to consider?
All right, so my requested board action today is 1, adopt the project design plans and specifications pursuant to California Government Code Section 830.6, and 2, authorize district staff to advertise for construction bids for the state line tanks recoating project.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 6B, return activated sludge pump station replacement project. Danielle.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Danielle Morse, Grant Coordinator. Today I am here to request that the board adopts an updated reimbursement resolution for an application that was submitted to the Clean Water SRF State Revolving Loan Fund for the return activated sludge pump station replacement project. Goodness. So you may recall I was before the board in December of 2024 to request approval on both a reimbursement and an authorizing resolution for this application. At that time, the project costs were in the about $18.7 million. This year, we had to cancel the blower project that was scheduled due to other pressing urgencies at the wastewater treatment plant. And in order to move forward with the RAS project, there were 2 electrical transformers that needed to be replaced in order to allow the new pump station to operate, I believe. So we moved those components onto the project scope for the RAS project, so that we could move forward with that project, but it did increase the cost to an amount that was over the initial reimbursement resolution that I submitted. So previously I requested approval of a resolution for not to exceed $19 million, and I am here today to ask for your approval to increase that amount to not to exceed $20 million for this project. Are there any questions?
Questions? I mean, this is a very much needed project, and I understand kind of the changes, and the SRF is a really good source of low interest funding, so makes sense to me.
Okay, great. Well then, I request that the board adopts the updated reimbursement resolution number 3326-26 for Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund application to the State Water Resources Control Board for the return activated sludge pump station replacement project.
So moved.
Second. Thank you, Danielle. All right. Moving on to standing and ad hoc committee and liaison reports.
I went last week to City Council chambers. We have the successor agency, which was previously the redevelopment, which is just basically, it's a very short meeting, but I got to meet Heather, the new city council person. So she took over the seat on that committee, and she seemed very excited and full of energy, and yeah, she was very happy to be a part of it, and she had a lot of questions, and so it was nice to be able to meet with her and talk to her. And it's a pretty, like Brooke Lane told her, this will be the shortest meeting you've ever been to. You're ever going to attend.
What's normally on the agenda on something like
It's just to pay the to pay the obligations that are had, and that is going to go on until 2037. And it did come up. Heather asked, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we just pay it off? But we're getting some of those funds from tax, property tax.
We contribute to those redevelopment bonds every year. It's automatically deducted from the property taxes collected by the water agency. And it changes a little bit every year depending on assessed values. I think last year it was around $500,000. So we will continue to contribute that much of our property tax to those bonds probably until the date that
2037 is when the last payment will be made. So we got a bit.
What's our share on it?
It was about $500,000, I think, last year.
Just for SCTV?
Yes, just for SCTV. Yeah.
Joey, anything? I don't really have any ad hoc meetings or anything like that, but I did attend the ECC this time around, which is great, and congratulations, Shannon, for being Employee of the Month. It was really she was very surprised. It was a good one. It was a good one. No, covered lots of ground, including new hires, promotions. I basically provided a little bit of kind of update from the board's perspective, provided a much, I guess, needed and appreciated thank you to the staff for all the accomplishments in 2025, and then just talked about kind of where we're going into the future as a board in terms of CIP and the budget and consideration of rates and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, not more than that, other than it's the first time I ever had chicken and waffle casserole for breakfast. That was very, very interesting. It was very good. But that's all I have to report on the ECC, unless there's anything I'm missing. But no, it was good. No? Okay. Moving on to board member reports. Okay. Staff attorney reports, item 9A, 2024 water audit report. John.
Good afternoon, Mr. President and fellow directors. I'm here today to give you an update on the 2024 water audit. So this task has been previously performed by our no longer with us principal engineer, Steve Caswell. He took the task on. So I think many of you are very familiar with the water audits that occur each year, but I did want to provide some background because I wasn't sure if Director Henderson, how much background he had on the water audit. So it is a requirement of the state legislature. It came out of SB 555, which was in 2015, and it established that each water purveyor was going to have to provide annual water audits starting in 2016. As you guys are aware, Mr. Caswell worked diligently and worked with the state. I guess he was ahead of the game to get our adjusted standard corrected because I listed some of the participants that Mr. Caswell had worked with, such as the Association of California Water Agencies and AWWA. But again, he worked with these individuals because they wanted to establish a standard that was about 23 gallons per connection per day. So GPCD is gallons per connection per day. That's lost. That was a significantly low adjusted standard, and so he did a lot of work to present data to the state. And he actually was shooting for a target of 72 gallons per connection per day to be our initial set standard that we would work there as the benchmark down. However, the state went with an adjusted standard of 60.2 gallons per connection per day. Later on, the legislature adopted regulations in 2022, and there was some, each water audit is required to perform a level 1 audit validation. They want to make sure that the data is verifiable and the data is accurate. The 2024 water audit did pass the level 1 validation, so we did have good news there. Some of the questionnaires that came out of the legislature in 2022 as the regulations were questionnaires around pressure management. So what are we doing with our distribution system to alleviate any of our losses, such as installing possibly pressure reducing valves in the system. So there's some questionnaires around that, and then there's some questionnaires around asset management. And so obviously we know we have a strong CIP program that we've been driving to replace some of our distribution mains. And then as I'll get to some of the terminology, when we talk about water loss, there's two types of water loss. There's what we call real water loss, so that's the actual water loss that is lost through leaks and say, flushing of hydrants and actual loss of real water. Then there's what's called the apparent loss standard. So those are losses due to either metering inaccuracies due to maybe failure to calibrate the meters or billing inaccuracies. So I provided a couple terminology there. Again, I just described what real water loss was and apparent water loss. But some of the key performance indicators, the KPIs that I'm going to discuss in the next slide is And the one I really want to focus in on is this infrastructure leak index. It's a performance indicator which measures the ratio of your current annual real losses to versus what they classify as an unavoidable annual real loss. Now, unavoidable annual real loss is a definition that's, I think it's a term that came from the International Water Association. And what it does, it takes into account your size of your system, length of your distribution mains, your age of your distribution mains, your pressure, and they come up with what your system should be at for unavoidable losses. And so this year's 2024 data, I think you guys are going to be very happy with. We've worked our real losses down to showing that we're showing a real loss of about 27.2 gallons per capita or per connection per day. And our apparent losses are under our standard of 3.8, which is showing up at 3.1. The infrastructure leak index is what I really wanted to focus on. So when I was initially looking at these water standards set by the state, I thought our adjusted standard of 60.2 was going to be extremely high. However, when I started looking at all the other water providers throughout the state, our number of 60.2 was actually, I would say, in the middle of the pack. There was numbers in the range of upwards of almost 200. And so then I started looking at the infrastructure leak index, which was one of the KPIs, and it actually said that infrastructure leak index of 1.5 shows up as a very efficient system. It's not until you get into the 3 to the actual 7 range that they say you're satisfactory, and anything greater than 8 is inefficient. So we are actually showing up as very efficient. I think we can attribute that to the satellite leak detection programs that we've put in place. Again, strong CPI program geared towards the distribution system replacement. And then did want to touch on the annual cost of the real losses is up year after year. However, I think that's just due to the annual operating costs due to after the 2020 pandemic and the increases to the costs. And with that, some of the accomplishments this year, we completed source meter testing and calibration, so all our production meters were calibrated, and I'm not sure if that was 2024 or was it in 2023, but then we're also, IT, we're moving towards some improved data collection, so we're creating kind of a centralized repository so we can actually, across different departments, capture any time, say, such as a hydrant is flushed, how many gallons, and that's not just a paper that's going to get lost in one of the department supervisors' offices. Now it's going to a centralized repository. It's uploaded automatically now, and so IT is working with us to create that kind of centralized data system. This water audit was it was a big obstacle in terms of data compilation. I had to work amongst numerous different departments. And so I just want to say a big thank you to, starting with our CFO all the way down to Lauren, our water conservation specialist. I couldn't have done it without them. Again, it was an enormous amount of data compilation, and it was a very big obstacle, but it was a learning process, and I feel very confident now, though, going into 2025.
Thank you. Can you click back to the your definitions slide? I was curious. So I guess I was looking at the infrastructure leak index, so current annual real losses versus unavoidable annual real losses. And so how would you characterize the unavoidable annual real losses? Are those things like flushing and things like that that are just kind of part of the normal maintenance of the system, or?
Yeah, the unavoidable annual real losses, like I said, they take into account, there's a couple metrics they take into account, like I said, the size of the system. So it's the length of the distribution mains, the types of the distribution mains, age of the distribution mains, the pressure in the system, and they take this into some kind of a logarithm that creates this number that says this is your system's unavoidable annual real losses.
Okay, so it's not necessarily based on just
No, there's an logarithm of, yeah.
And then I guess the question on, so it looks like our meters for sourcing, those are calibrated, but do we do anything in terms of our connected meters, like to our customers? Do we do any calibration related to those?
That's a great question, President Ramos. So as I stated our production meters were calibrated, but the service side meters, I guess the residential meters, that is coming. They are creating a program in our inspections department. Ross is currently working on that to get the residential side meters calibrated.
We test 3 inch and above 10% of our systems every year.
3 inch and above? Yeah. So not necessarily residential or?
So when the meters go in, they do have a cascade cycle that runs through them. So we are launching that also this summer as well. We said have a random example of our meters of what we're at that check.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? Any questions or comments from the public? Thank you, John. Appreciate your presentation.
Thanks, John.
Okay, I think we have another item here, 9B, grant update.
Hello again. I think John's presentation is an excellent segue into what I wanted to report on this afternoon. So in 2022, the district received a grant in the amount of $937,901 from the California Department of Water Resources to implement the Water Use Efficiency and Water Loss Data System Implementation Project. This was a rather complex project that involved 3 different components and 3 different project managers managing each of those components. The first component was to optimize water loss data technology to assist the district with identifying rapidly correcting water system losses. The second component was to install additional hardware on the district's advanced metering infrastructure to improve our water consumption data. And then lastly, we enhanced the district's water efficiency program by targeting customers with identified leaks with incentives to repair those leaks and to reduce their overall water use. As we reflect on the project's success and as we begin our closeout process, we are both very excited and proud to share with you the many accomplishments that have come out of this funding. I'm going to let the project managers speak for each of their components and to provide you with a little bit of a demonstration. So first we're going to hear from Lauren on the water efficiency, then we'll hear from Ross on AMI, and then lastly, Chris will come up and give you a short demonstration on the data warehouse that John was just describing in his presentation that has allowed us to really increase the accuracy of the data that we're collecting. So with that, I'll let Lauren come up and say a few words. And we won't take too long.
We almost had a record meeting today.
Yeah.
I
know. We can still keep on track. Good afternoon, board members. Lauren Benefield, Water Conservation Specialist. So as Danielle mentioned, the work that the Water Efficiency Department conducted, part of the grant, was for rebates and helping to reduce water use. We had rebates for our residential customers. You probably know the slew of them. You could name them yourselves, but our toilet, clothes washer, irrigation controller, turf buyback, and the leak repair rebate. These rebates were widely used and were really beneficial in helping our customers become more water efficient, help them save water at home, help them save money on their bill as well. In addition to our traditional rebates, we also had a new pilot program, the Public Agency Retrofit Program. So the goal of this particular portion of the project was to encourage the installation and replacement of water efficient fixtures for our agency partners, often knowing that they have little to no budget to help replace fixtures, and so let's help them. Let's give them money for it. And so we did have some lessons learned. The first is that it's not just budget that impacts their ability to complete these projects, but also staff time available. The project that we were working with was to 100% of the cost to replace the fixtures, but it didn't include, having a contractor come in and tear out the toilets and put the new toilets in. So that was, unexpected, but of course, lessons learned. But in meeting with different public agencies, LTUSD and the city of South Lake Tahoe did take advantage. So LTUSD completed 7 retrofits at 7 of their school sites, including the bus garage and district offices. They replaced all of their toilets, bathroom sink faucets, aerators, and even kitchen sink pumps. As a note, all of the toilets that were replaced were all 3.5 gallon per flush. So they're old toilets, and they replaced every single one of them. And so I think that's pretty amazing and awesome. And this portion of the project cost $26,411.24. The city also completed a project. They replaced faucets, urinals, aerators, toilets at all 5 of their park sites. I want to share the water savings in particular for this portion of the project. They completed the project in 24, and so in 25 we got to see what sort of water savings do we actually incur. So in total, this project saved approximately 757,000 gallons in 2025, which is impressive. Of course, there are some factors that go into this: how many folks are coming to the park sites and flushing toilets, how many visitors do we have in town for boat ramps and things like that. But very pleased with first-year water savings. This portion of the project cost just around $38,000. One last note is that, the indoor water efficiency projects, especially at the city and LTUSD, they do really help to decrease the amount of wastewater that we're seeing coming into the wastewater treatment plant that we're having to treat and then pump out of the Tahoe Basin. So, we have 757,000 gallons that are not coming in 2025 that then we don't have to treat and spend money on. So super happy and pleased with how this turned out. So there's the highlights for my portion. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Ross Cole, Inspection Supervisor. So I project manage the hardware installation of the additional AMI meter reading tower that we added to the 100-foot radio tower out here in the plant. It had some challenges and components to it where we basically did an assessment on where our lowest signal strength is for reading meters in our system. We found kind of the Y Sierra track kind of had some gaps there. We tried the Tahoe pump station, putting an antenna there. That's in like a visually sensitive area. They had a lot of other challenges. H Street tank, tried that. Being too close to the airport posed another challenge. So we ended up being at this 100-foot radio tower, and it actually grabbed a lot of meters. So we currently, with the installation of that, we have about 2,000 meters on reading right now on that. It was commissioned in December. The great part about this is it really stayed in that aligned with the budget because all the infrastructure was already there. And then the beautiful part about it is the base station is ran in the generator building, and that's the last thing to get out of power. So it's this ultimate redundancy to our meter reading system. It's kind of a slam dunk. So, and then,
so Russ, just really quick. So
yeah.
You were originally looking at setting up, I guess, antenna at 3 different sites, and the decision was made that, hey, be more efficient to go higher with this particular. Okay.
Correct.
Right.
And the construction costs to erect the tower at the Tahoe Keys was like insane. I couldn't believe how much money it was. So we just really had to leverage and stay in the kind of the constraints of the budget. And I thought, well, I stare at this thing every day at work, so maybe we should try to utilize it some more. So it's really great because it does offer that redundancy to our leak detection and the data that goes into our WaterSmart program. So like, let's say we have Heavenly as an AMI tower, we have Pole Creek, Flagpole, Forest Mountain, and Gardner. So these are all on tanks to get the advantageous of the height, right, the altitude. With that being said, if one of those goes down because of, a power outage or whatever, we have that redundancy here at this main plant always on. WaterSmart does not backfeed data, so if we can continue to reduce the amount of data loss with WaterSmart, the better for our customers, right? And then for leak detection. And then the beautiful part about this is, as well, is when we're building our AMI network, Census, our meter brand that we use, has these IoT, Internet of Things products coming out faster than I can speak. about pressure sensors, water loss, gateways that we can put on PRVs. It's kind of going to open up a whole new world for us with telemetry. So I think it was just a great move for us to do this and leverage these grant funds for this antenna.
Is there any way that people can tap into that transmission, of that information, or actually feed information into the system?
From
somebody just grabbing the signal and downloading
that? No, it's on a two-way communication, so it's completely one-to-one, and I don't think they can.
Pretty secure. I guess I'm looking at Chris.
Yeah, maybe Chris might be able to help me with that one. Yeah.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah. And I guess the question is, following that is just, so are we monitoring the entirety of our water smart, I guess, meters that are out there? I mean, we've got 100% coverage on that in terms of telemetry and bringing that information in?
Yeah.
No dark spots?
So we did shine some light on some of the dark spots. Right now we are currently reading, but so how we read meters is we have a 3-day window where we grab all our meter reads for our building. And whatever doesn't read on the towers, then we move to like a drive-by system, and we go and kind of capture all those. And then we tier down to like an actual manual flipping the lids, looking at what's the problem.
How's that job?
Yeah, why didn't it read? So, and with that drive-by, on average monthly, we get maybe 150. So we're at like almost a 99% read rate. It's incredible, especially with the topography and the challenges that we have up here. So I'm pretty proud of that. We have about 15,000 approximate nodes out there, meaning the little transceiver units. So yeah, and it's an incredible system. It's very robust.
So is that an RFID technology?
No, but they will be implementing the RFID going forward, and I was just at a conference for our meter brand, and they are trying to get that rolled into their technology platform. But yeah, they're constantly coming out with products that we're gonna leverage a lot of information there. Yeah.
TRDs and pumps.
Yeah. A lot of telemetry coming out for that. So now we have the foundation built. Now we can kind of leverage it and use all these little different data points. So. Okay. Any more questions?
All right. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, board. Chris Skelly, IT manager. Excited to share with you kind of the product of my project. Can you put me up on the screens, please? It's not a presentation. I'm going to try and do a live demo, so those could either go one of two ways, right? But what you are looking at here is kind of one of 5 reports we asked our contractor that we went out to bid for, or RFP for, to produce what's called a data warehouse. So a data warehouse is to centralize data from different systems. Like we have SCADA collecting all of our operational production data. We have census capturing all of our consumption information. The data warehouse takes both of those data sources and a couple others, marries them all together, validates the data, and then stores it permanently. And so we can really try and trust this data model as a good source of truth. So currently we went back to 2022 because that's what we had the census information for. There was a term in our contract saying that they would only store 3 years worth of data. So we went out and grabbed all of 2022's operational data and then pulled that into the data warehouse and then really started going through the math, right? So this is right here, the system-wide. This was one of the easier graphs and data we were able to analyze first because we didn't have to worry about where the water was moving. If we look back at the first screen here, this is 2022, the current. This graph is a little bit confusing on first sight because there's 2 different measurements over here. The first one on the left-hand side of the graph is going to be your production and consumption figures. On the right-hand side is going to be your gallons lost. If we put the gallons lost in the same chart or the same measure, it'd be flat on the bottom, right? So staff has on-demand access to this. It updates daily, goes out and pulls any census meter reads that haven't been there for a few days. We've seen up to 6 weeks it could take a census meter read to come in. So the data warehouse will look back that far to try and pull in all the data it can, and then it reruns all of the different math and analytics to be able to produce these figures for us every day on a rolling cycle. Currently, there are 25 million different reads in this data warehouse. So about 2 million reads come from the operational side, just because there's fewer devices that we're reading from, and then about 23 million meter reads between 2022 and current today. Where it got a little bit more complicated was when we started breaking out our district metered areas in this platform, so we could really hone in on where we're losing the most water. So if I look at the DMA detail tab down here, this is going to be our state line DMA. It's showing a roughly 8% loss over the year, past 12 months. What we had to do, though, is we had to tell the data warehouse, these are your production devices, right, whether it's a well, a tank, a PRV, a booster, and then what devices feed zones either into the state line zone or out of the state line zone, including tanks, because the tanks can store the water, so it shows a negative production value. And then when the tank level goes down, the positive production value goes back into the DMA. And then if it leaves the state line zone altogether, it gets subtracted from the total and not counted as water loss because the next zone will pick it up. And if I compare that to, say, Twin Peaks, the one right below it, this one's up a little higher at about 19%. And then, so as we trend these over time, and again, they're updating daily, we can actually start seeing, are we producing more water in a zone all of a sudden that we weren't doing previously? And so we're going to really hone in our efforts on going and find those leaks. These dips in the data here that happen throughout the summer came up in all of the different data. And I'm curious if the board can pick out what those dips in data are. There's a hint here. It happens every Saturday.
Non-watering day.
It's a non-watering day. It's Saturday. So now we can actually quantify the amount of water we're saving, either per zone or system-wide, what our non-watering days are saving us in water use. So. There's a few other reports here, but they have some customer information, so I don't want to bring them up in this public forum. But are there any questions?
You guys are storing this on site, it looks like?
We are on site, yeah.
How much, I'm just curious, nerding out, how much data is in that data warehouse?
The database right now is about 150 gigs.
Wow. Less than I would anticipate.
It was less than I was anticipating.
Which, that's good. So, looks like we're future-proof on that, at least. That's good.
Very nice. Yeah, I'd like to dig into that non-watering days a bit, and I guess what's the thinking on that? Just that you're not watering, so you're not producing as much, you're using more?
You're not producing as much water, correct. Yeah, so if we go back to the system-wide loss here.
Seems like a great tool.
Yeah. And then you can summarize or expand out into the system-wide graph here will let you do up to the day, and then the DMA will actually go down to the hour. And so whether engineering wants to plug in their, water modeling softwares or John doing a future water loss audit, we've got the tools now to be able to help us do that.
For the opportunities for what to do with it, that's cool.
So future enhancements we're already planning. We're looking at Liberty and trying to get an automated data feed from Liberty to be able to plug in energy information in here, cost, how much energy we're using, things like that, to actually really get down to that cost per gallon produced, right, per station, and then system-wide. So we're also looking at maybe some automated alerting tools, maybe plugging in an AI model to this to help us pick out some of the things we might be missing because of all the data that's here. And then we also want to expand the use, too, for the sewer side. Right? This was paid for by a water grant. We're going to kind of stick to the water side of the house, but we also want to expand it to be able to bring in the sewer information as well and recycled water.
So in terms of Liberty, so it's more, I guess, what's their willingness to participate?
They've been somewhat receptive. We are getting a manually generated data file currently monthly. which we're working on automating that import into this. But I'd like to see an automated data exchange between us and Liberty.
So it's basically coming in with our bills?
Yeah.
That we get now? Thank you.
No, I'm sure it's not easy for Liberty to break that out. So I'm sure that's where the hesitation is for them to isolate what our accounts are out of that data file being live for you guys. So.
Well, they can break it out every.
They can, but
we're getting the CSV every month for every station.
As you can see here, the data here is much more complex than on the back end than it looks on the front end here. So, awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Any more? That was good. He got me.
I'm like, dumb.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. Moving on to item 10, General Manager Report.
Just a couple of additional items. We had a nice meet and greet here at our offices with the new City Public Works Director, Dr. Qureshi. Very nice man. And his background is in transportation, so we did briefly go through some descriptions of our system, but mainly we just wanted to discuss our continuing collaborative efforts that we want to keep moving forward. And of course, he was totally open to that. He does have an interesting background because he's not your typical public works director, because prior to actually practicing it in person, he was a college professor back east, right? Missouri. Okay. Yeah, his background is slightly different than your typical public works director, but it was a good meet and greet. And then a couple of weeks ago, we had a very fruitful meeting with the El Dorado Water Agency, at least from our perspective, because beginning next year in 2027, they are going to take a much more active role with the Groundwater Sustainability Agency duties. Specifically, they will take on the responsibility of completing the annual reporting, but the biggest hurdle is they'll also be taking over the required 5-year update to the plan. So it's quite a bit of work that they're taking off of our engineering department's, specifically Mark's desk, and so that'll let him be more active with his well testing and so forth. Yeah. So that's
still going to require some more time, though, right?
Oh yeah, because we'll still have to provide them all the data that we have. Yeah, but it'll save us some time. But it's I think it's a good transition because we've been doing it for many years now, so it's kind of their turn to take it over. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. That's all.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. All right. Moving on to item 11. Here's the past and future meetings. We are not holding a closed session today, as I understand. Is that still where we are? Okay. I guess with that, meeting adjourned.